You've probably heard it. Once you hit 35, your fertility falls off a cliff. But is that actually true? Now, let's state the obvious. Of course, fertility declines with age. That's common sense. But the belief that everything just drops off a cliff once you hit 35, that's a belief that deserves a closer look. Where did that idea even come from, and is it as dramatic as it sounds? This video isn't a how-to or medical advice. I'm not here to tell you what decisions to make for your life, your family, or your family planning. I'm here to open up a thoughtful conversation around fertility, the narratives that we've been given, and how we can approach these decisions with clarity instead of fear. So if you maybe want to hear a different side of the story, let's dive on in. Hey friend, welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Jillz and I help women step into their power, tap into their divine feminine, and become their best self, live their best life. So if that's something you want to do, you should subscribe and stick around. Now, before we dive in, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. I am not here to tell you to wait until you're 45 to have children and totally ignore biology. What I am here to do is unpack where this fertility cliff narrative really came from and what the data actually says. Now, let's get into the real story behind this whole fertility cliff thing, because honestly, the truth is going to surprise you. But real quick, I would love to kindly thank BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. When we talk about fertility, there's often a focus on our hormones, our cycles, our physical health, of course. But the emotional side of this journey is just as important, and that's why having someone in your corner really does matter. No matter what you're navigating, whether it's stress around health, family, relationships, or just everyday life, having someone to talk to can make a huge difference. Therapy can give you a safe space to process what's coming up for you, to stay grounded through the ups and the downs, and remind you that you don't have to figure it all out alone. Even sometimes just having an outside perspective can change the way you see a situation, and that's where BetterHelp comes in. It's an online therapy platform that makes it easy and convenient to get matched with a licensed therapist. No waiting rooms, no commuting, just professional support from home on your own schedule. You just fill out a quick questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist within a couple days, and if for some reason that first match isn't quite right, that's okay. You can switch therapists at any time, no extra cost. If therapy feels like the right next move for you, just click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/Jillz to get 10% off your first month. Now let's get back into the video, and here is the thing that's going to blow your mind. A lot of the statistics we hear about fertility declining after 35 are based off of birth records from rural French villages from the 1600s and 1700s. I'm not kidding. We're talking about data from a time when women didn't have access to proper healthcare, proper nutrition, or probably even clean water. And just to be clear, these records are not from wealthy women who are living in the countryside and living in these chateaus. They were most likely poor farmers who were just scraping by. And that's an important distinction. Dr. Jean Twenge is a psychology professor and researcher who dug deep into this. And she found that these historical studies and this data has been cited over and over again in modern fertility discussions. But think about it. Are we really the same as women living 300 years ago in rural French farming villages? Like, let's paint a picture here. We're talking about women who most likely got married in their early 20s or so, who didn't have modern birth control options. They were likely pregnant or breastfeeding for most of their 20s or 30s. By 35, they might have already had 6 or 7 kids while living in conditions that we can barely imagine. No running water, no grocery stores, no modern medicine. They were probably hauling water from wells and tending to their animals all day, and trying to keep their children from dying of diseases that we no longer have issues with. And here we are, using their birth patterns to make decisions about our own fertility in 2025, when we have prenatal vitamins, ultrasounds, plumbing and sanitation, modern homes, refrigeration, air conditioning and heating, access to fresh food year-round, grocery stores, pharmacies, hospitals within driving distance, and the ability to order organic kale to your doorstep. But here's the real kicker. Those studies weren't measuring fertility rates. They were measuring birth rates, which are very different things. Do you see the massive problem here? Birth rates tell us how many babies were born, not how capable women are of getting pregnant. And in the 1700s, if you already had 5 or 6 kids by the age of 35, there was a strong chance that you probably didn't want any more. Think about it. You're 35, you've been pregnant and breastfeeding for a really long time now. You're just trying to keep the kids that you have alive and fed. Your body is totally exhausted, and at this point, another baby isn't a blessing. It's a huge challenge, and in some cases, a potential death death sentence, both for you and the kids that you're already struggling to feed. So these women probably got really creative about avoiding pregnancy. Maybe they learned natural family planning, or maybe they just stopped having sex with their husbands, or maybe their husbands died at an early age from diseases that we can cure today with antibiotics and modern medicine. The point is that we're looking at data that shows women having fewer babies after 35 and concluding that their fertility crashed, when the reality is that they likely made the very reasonable, very smart choice to stop having children at that point. What if they weren't trying to get pregnant and failing, but they were trying to actively not get pregnant and succeeding? So what happens when we look at studies of actual modern women instead of French peasants in the 1600s? Well, according to Dr. Jean Twenge's research, and I'm just telling you what she found, the picture looks very different. When Dr. Twenge looked at contemporary studies, or at least the ones that she can find, she found that women aged 27 to 34 had an 86% chance of conceiving within a year, and that women aged 35 to 39 had an 82% chance of conceiving within a year. That's only a 4% difference. Now, she also found something fascinating though about timing. A 35 to 39-year-old's fertility 2 days before ovulation was the same as a 19 to 26-year-old's fertility 3 days before ovulation. So older couples who time things just 1 day better than younger ones can essentially eliminate the difference. Now compare that to the scary statistic we've all heard, that 1 in 3 women aged 35 to 39 will not be able to conceive within a year. But remember where that stat comes from. Yes, those old French birth records. Now, you've probably also heard about declining egg reserves and how as you age, you're running out of eggs, right? Here's something that I just discovered. I did not know this until recently, so here's what's interesting. Women are born with about 1 to 2 million eggs, but by the time they even hit puberty, they only have about 300 to 400,000 eggs left. That means about 75% of your lifetime egg supply is already gone before you even have your first period. By age 30, women have lost about 90% of their eggs, but when you initially hear 90% gone, that sounds kind of terrifying, right? But when you realize that 75% is already gone before you hit puberty, before you have your peak fertility, before you can even conceive a child, suddenly that 90% doesn't sound so catastrophic. This suggests that egg quantity isn't the scary factor that we're told it is, and what's more important is egg quality, not quantity. So with that said, what about birth defects as you age? Because of course that's something to think about. You've probably heard your risk of birth defects doubles after 35, which sounds very scary. And technically that's true, but here's what they're not telling you about those numbers. Dr. Twenge looked at the actual statistics and found that the chances of a birth defect go from 0.5% before 35 to 1% after 35. So yes, technically your risk increases from 0.5% to 1%, but that's not as scary as they make it sound. The absolute increase is tiny, even though the relative increase sounds terrifying. But also, what about miscarriage? Yes, miscarriage rates do go up with age, and there's no getting around that one. The numbers show about 15% for women in their 20s and early 30s, and about 27% for women aged 35 to 39. But here's something important Dr. Twenge found though. A lot of the miscarriage statistics that we hear are actually from women undergoing IVF. And that's relevant because these women who are undergoing IVF, they usually have higher rates of miscarriage than women conceiving naturally. So again, we might be getting a scarier picture than what applies to most women. And the truth is that we don't always know. It's not always easy to know exact statistics. So when you look at the modern data, instead of 300-year-old French birth records, the picture does change. And what she discovered is that the fertility cliff at 35 isn't really a cliff at all, and it's more like a gradual slope. Dr. Twenge found that the real steep decline in your fertility doesn't actually happen until you start to hit your 40s. But even then, there are tons of people who have healthy, successful, easy pregnancies in their 40s. It's not a guarantee that you'll struggle. My mom had me at 40, no problems. So much of women's healthcare, especially around fertility, is delivered in a fear-based way. And while planning and awareness absolutely matter, living under a cloud of fear doesn't help anyone make better decisions. So the truth is a lot more nuanced. Fertility does decline with age, but that decline is a lot more gradual and a lot less dramatic than we've been led to believe. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you deserve to make life changes from a place of clarity and calm, not panic and fear. But even with all that said, we can't ignore another reality. Infertility rates really are rising. And if it's not just about age, then what's really going on? Why are so many women of all ages, even women in their early 20s, struggling to get pregnant more than ever before? So while it's important to stop buying into these dramatic fear-based myths around how your fertility rapidly declines after 35, it's also important to recognize the bigger picture, that something else is going on here. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Now, of course, there's a lot of different factors that play into this, but first, lifestyle and stress. We live in a culture that keeps us in fight or flight mode 24/7. And stress hormones like cortisol can throw off ovulation, it can impact sperm quality, and completely mess with the delicate balance that is our reproductive system. But it's not just mental stress. Look at how disconnected modern life is from the way that our bodies are designed to function. Think about it. Most of our days are spent sitting under fluorescent lights, working 8 hours at a job we don't like, sitting in a chair all day, barely moving, staring at screens. We barely get sunlight or fresh air or natural movement. A lot of the food we eat isn't even real food anymore. It's processed, it's chemicals, it's engineered. Our bodies were built for survival in nature, moving, eating whole foods, resting when the sun goes down. Instead, we're forcing our bodies into this artificial rhythm of late nights and constant stimulation and chronic stress. And when your body feels unsafe or out of sync, reproduction is the first thing it's willing to compromise. Survival comes first. Reproduction and your fertility takes a back seat. Think about it. When your body is under chronic stress, whether that means you're not getting the nutrients you need, or you're not getting the sleep you need, or you're in a really toxic environment, it's basically getting the signal to shut down reproduction. And your biology is saying, we're not safe. This isn't a good time to bring life into the world. And it makes sense. Your body's top priority is always survival, not fertility. If it thinks resources are scarce and danger is constant, it'll redirect energy away from ovulation, away from pregnancy, and into just keeping you alive. And that's why so many women who are under a lot of chronic high stress, that's why they struggle with irregular cycles or imbalanced hormones, or their fertility just feels like an uphill battle. It's not that their body is broken, it's that their body is trying to protect them. And this is not based off of science or research, this is just my own opinion on the energetics of conception and pregnancy. When you are going through a fertility journey like that, there is so much energy that has to get pulled into your body and into yourself. But when you are constantly giving to others, when you are giving your energy away constantly and you're focused on all these different things, then that energy is going outward. It's not going inward. I know someone who struggled to get pregnant for quite a while, and the reason she believed that she was able to finally get pregnant is because she stopped putting all of her energy outward and started pulling it inward. She started focusing on nourishing herself. Next reason why infertility is on the rise is because of the environment we live in. Our great-grandmothers didn't grow up surrounded by plastics and pesticides and fragrances and chemicals in every single product that we use. Today, we're exposed to endocrine disruptors constantly, and those chemicals can mimic hormones in the body and disrupt fertility for both men and women. It's not about living in fear of every little thing, but the truth is that the world we live in today is much different than the world our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers lived in. Another reason why women struggle to get pregnant, though, and what's often overlooked, is male infertility. About 40 to 50% of infertility cases are actually related to men. You know, a lot of times infertility gets thrown on the woman and, it's her problem, but men are just as important to this equation as women. Sperm counts have been declining dramatically in recent decades, and things like stress, smoking, alcohol, poor diet, even constant heat exposure like having a laptop on your lap or hot tubs or saunas, even those can play a role. And here's the thing, if the sperm isn't healthy, then the egg is not going to allow it in for fertilization. And by the way, male fertility declines with age too. Sperm quality and DNA integrity go down over time, and risks for miscarriage or genetic issues increase as they get older, but that's something that we don't really talk about. And finally, yes, there are some medical and biological factors too, like if you struggle with PCOS or endometriosis or thyroid issues or autoimmune issues. All of these can make getting pregnant harder regardless of your age. So when we look at all these factors together, like stress and the environment we live in and all the chemicals around us and male fertility issues and medical conditions, it becomes clear that the fertility issues we're struggling with isn't just because women are waiting too long. It's because we're now living in a world that's not set up to support optimal fertility at any age. Dr. Twenge says one of the best things you can do for supporting and increasing your fertility is really simple. No smoking, no drugs, no caffeine, no alcohol. And for the man too, not just you. These are all linked to fertility problems, and these are all things that we can easily control, unlike our age. And also, if you are gonna try to conceive in the next few months, having your partner avoid things like hot tubs and saunas. I had a friend who struggled to get pregnant for a while in her late 20s, but once her husband finally stopped smoking, boom, pregnant. I had another friend who struggled to get pregnant for a while, but once her husband finally stopped going to the sauna, boom, pregnant. But here's where I'm gonna give you some advice. And these are just like my own thoughts. Here's how I kind of see it, and maybe this is a weird way to put it, but if a woman just acted like she was preparing her body for pregnancy, even if she wasn't planning to try to get pregnant anytime soon, she'd probably be living her healthiest life, which in turn would likely preserve her fertility longer for when/if that day comes where she decides she wants to conceive. Think about it, if you're trying to get pregnant in the next month or two, you're probably not going to live off of soda and chips every single day, right? You're gonna actually eat real meals. You're gonna eat things that fuel your body. You're not gonna binge on random crap, but you are also gonna make sure that you're getting enough calories in too, because that's also just as important. You're gonna make sure you move your body, but not beat yourself into the ground. You're gonna do workouts that actually feel good to you, not crazy intensity. You'd make sure you're getting enough sleep because you know how important that is. And honestly, you'd probably also slow down a little. You'd be a little bit more mindful and gentle with yourself. You'd probably tap in and try to be more in tune with yourself. You'd try to live in a way that actually supports your body, not fight against it. And maybe you tap into your feminine energy a little bit more. These things are the foundation for living a healthy life and also improving fertility at any age. So to bring this all home and to wrap this all up, fertility does decline with age. That's biology, that's common sense. We can all use our brains. But it's not the dramatic cliff at 35 that we've all been scared into believing. The real picture is a lot more gradual, a lot more nuanced, and honestly, a lot more hopeful. Infertility rates are rising, but not just because women are waiting too long. It's about stress, your environment, your lifestyle, your chemical burden, women's health, men's health, all of it. And that means that there are so many things that we can influence. At the end of the day, the best thing you can do is to take care of yourself. Not out of fear, but out of love. Eat real food. Move your body in a way that feels good. Get sleep, regulate your nervous system, live in a way that actually supports you and isn't putting you into fight or flight mode constantly. And if you do want to dig into nervous system healing, because that is such a huge part of our stress levels and our well-being, I highly recommend you check out this video here, how to actually heal your nervous system. Trust me, I break it down in a way that you've probably never heard before, and this info will change your life. So I'll see you over here, or I'll just see you next time in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.